So we struggled too, and that was part of our learning process. Where do I have a hard time caring about your needs? Where do we have a hard time just coming through for each other? What does that look like? Really look at what they are doing. That's difficult because we tend to want to blame the other person and say, if you did it this way, everything would be fine. But that's not what a relationship is. And I think social media and online has really changed our viewpoint of what can a relationship be. Certainly the 70s and the 80s changed our desire for what a relationship was. So we've had lots of shifts. I don't think necessarily that we have explored how that impacts marriage as much as would be important.
What if you turn hardship into greatness, anger into serenity? Everything changes. Make your life a masterpiece. Welcome, I'm Yannick, your host, and now joining me, Heather Browne. Dr. Heather Browne is the author of Thinking with the Heart, a relationship expert and a psychotherapist, and joins me now here on the show. Welcome, Dr. Browne, to the show. It's such a treat to have you.
Thank you very much. I am honored, Yannick.
Wonderful. So, just to give some context and so that our listeners get to know you a little bit more, introduce yourself in simply one sentence.
So, my role in this world is to try to help people find ways to connect with compassion, with care, for better communication.
Beautiful. Now, first and foremost, what made you write the book in the first place?
My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so, when you're raised with someone with mental illness, you have to learn all sorts of different ways of connecting. And so, what I found from experiences with her, if I brought compassion in to whatever conversation we had at the very beginning, then we could kind of maneuver where she was and where she wasn't. But if I tried to hold on to my reality and not hers, we were lost. And so the premise is, how do I stay true to myself and support you in staying true to yourself as we step into conversations? And that's what my book is about. And that's what my practice has been largely about.
Yeah, and it's super successful. Even on Amazon, everyone just gives you basically 5 points because it's so poignantly written, so applicable, and really so powerful for everyone who has written it. So, really, congratulations. And I can imagine like the work that it took to ultimately come out with such a concise, helpful, and powerful book. And what a title, obviously, Thinking with the Heart. Now, just give us a little bit context. Of course, as you just mentioned, you basically already were to some extent forced to become a therapist given the circumstances that you grew up with. So, what ultimately led you finally to study psychology, and where did you find your place in it?
Well, I was always interested in the mind. And so when I was in my teenage years and my college years, I kind of danced between the theater and therapy. And there's a lot of crossover between the two. But as jobs, I kept going to group homes, I kept going to counseling situations. And so as I was a young adult, I really considered my heart pulled here. This is where I work. What if I were to study and actually learn beyond me just helping myself? And so that's what promoted me to start looking into master's programs.
And I also find it so important because I think, especially today, we all look in one way or another to really truly connect with human beings. And, on one hand, it's very tempting because we feel like we are somehow connected due to the fact that we have technology, social media. But on the other hand, it's also a way of alienating ourselves from actually really having those deep connections. And so therefore you really give a powerful way really to connect with people. And now, Red, let's just to start, like, how would you define the heart and love? How would you separate the two? Is there some connections between the two?
Between the heart and love.
Yeah.
So to me, the heart, of course, is the organ itself, but it's also um, the way you choose to connect and treat with others, how hearted it is. Love is the expression of that. So, speaking with the heart, the expression is the love aspect and how you do that. The intention behind it would be of the heart. And so, that's why to me, it's important to start there instead of starting with logic, reason, emotionality, but to start with the intention of what it is that you're wanting to do. What is the impact that you're hoping to have? And what kind of conversation, techniques, and skills do you utilize to do so?
And especially today, so give us a taste of what role communication plays in our lives.
Well, communication is everything, be it words, be it interaction, be it physicality. We're expressing at all times. We tend to rely, especially in the digital age, very much on words alone to convey the message. But words are just descriptions, they're just here as a tool for us to describe what we're feeling and what we're thinking. And I think we lean on that much too strongly and don't really take the time to find out, where is the person scared? Where does the person hide? What are the biases that we have? How do we create safety? There's so many things that we don't talk about. Is this a good time? Where are we going? There's so many things that we don't know. We haven't been taught to do before you start a really important conversation. And then it can really quickly go sideways. And we don't end up enjoying the time together or resolving anything. We're just upset, angry, and frustrated. Doesn't have to be that way. There's a lot of pre conversation, which is finding out some important questions that I think we'd be mindful to ask.
If you look back, and I mean, you are in your practice, you're practitioners for like almost 3 decades, I think. And so, what did change over the past, let's say, 20 years in terms of the issues that people come and see you?
Oh my goodness, it's been all over the board. So I started off working largely with teens and young adults. And then as I have matured in my life and learned more, it starts to open up more and more and more. But when I was working with teens and young adults, I saw how impactful the family was and how that role was important, which then led into working with couples. You'll find when you're in psychotherapy that there are certain seasons of things that you work through. And a lot of that will be what's going on in the culture. If anxiety is high, or depression is high, or cutting is high. But couples work is something that I just kept finding myself drawn to. And so I got more training in that to be able to specialize in that. And it's something that I love. The age range is now broader than it was long ago. I worked more so with people kind of within 10 years of me, and now it might be all the way down into 20s and then all the way up into, 60s and 70s. Sometimes in their 80s and 90s as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And when I think about family, and that comes up over and over again. I think the most concern that people have, especially in my circle, is always that my parents will potentially get separated or divorced. So walk us through what this actually means and why there are more and more couple who actually struggle and come and see you, because this is already an insight. Like, if someone has actually the courage to come and see you, that already shows that, hey, there is a willingness of improving. But that's, I guess, only really the peak of the iceberg.
It is, but it's a really important one. Without that, you're not going to be able to work with the couple. So as long as they come and they say, there's something that we're doing that isn't healthy, there's something that we're doing that isn't drawing us closer, we have these habits and these patterns that we need to change. We don't know what's going wrong. There's the place of them wanting to find out what they can do and also be willing to really look at what they are doing. That's difficult because we tend to want to blame the other person and say, if you did it this way, everything would be fine. But that's not what a relationship is. And I think social media and online has really changed our viewpoint of what can a relationship be. Certainly the 70s and the 80s changed our desire for what a relationship was. So we've had lots of shifts. I don't think necessarily that we have explored how that impacts marriage as much as would be important. People used to get married and they would stay together almost irregardless. And now that's not often the case. We live longer now too, and there's more responsibility on people than there were when it was like, a one income household. There's much more exposure, so there's more possibilities for things to cause challenge within the relationship, and I think all of that impacts it. Plus busy, busy, busy lives. And so we're finding oftentimes less satisfaction within the relationship and finding it in other places. So it's important. Even if therapy isn't the answer, it's important to check in with yourself and question, like, how are we doing as a couple? Where are we doing our best? Where are we not spending attention? How much are we caring for one another? Those are important questions to be assessing in your relationship.
How should the perfect relationship look like?
There's no such thing. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as perfection, and there's no one way for a relationship to be. The best relationship that I can have is one that both of us have talked about what it is that we desire, and we work toward trying to cultivate that within our relationship. But what I think is perfect for me won't be perfect for somebody else. And if our thought is we're going to ever reach perfection, then that means at some level we no longer want to learn and grow. It's important that we work and grow on our relationship with ourselves and with others our whole life.
And also, given the challenges today, as you mentioned, busy lives and so on and so forth. So what does it actually do to a culture and society? Because I always think about myself like this: like, if we already are fractured within like the nuclear family, within really the core, what a society should consist of, then how can you ever really find some social cohesion at large? And so, what were your observation? What people actually go through if they go, let's say, if you're a kid and you experience a divorce? What are the challenges for people? And of course, we can always make the argument there is like every adversity has its equal opportunity and vice versa. But I just want to get a taste of what this actually can do to people when their parents get a divorce.
Well, I think the most obvious challenge is it's two people who did not come up to a place of resolution together to be able to stay. And so that would be the biggest challenge in divorce. Why is it that what we committed to, we no longer are able to do? And so for children who go through a family that is divorced, there's that question. It hasn't really been modeled for them to resolve issues to a place that is successful. And so that, of course, is a place. But it really depends upon what is modeled for what the child would receive. There's a lot of families that are very loving to their children and very good parents, and they do end up divorced. So it, it each person's experience is their own, and the family dynamic they are in is their own expression of family as well. So hopefully there's a lot of soul searching in that. What did you see that you thought was supportive? What did you see that wasn't? What would you like to do differently? What would you like to replicate? And then also watching relationships in the world. Who do you see who you think handles communication with respect and honor and love? Who does not, and why might that be? There's a lot for us to learn from all the people that are around us. And certainly any relationship that we're experiencing, we can learn from. And then we make our own choices. Do I replicate it? Or is this something that I choose to do differently because I didn't think it was effective or healthy or supportive?
So if we face a situation like this, how do I start speaking to my spouse, for example, with my heart?
Well, it would start with caring about them. So, what is it that you desire of me? And where is it that you want something from me? And how is it that I love you well? And where are those places where I don't? And what can I do to help you feel safer, more secure in the relationship? And what do I do that doesn't cause that? What is it we want out of a relationship together? And what are we both doing to cultivate that? There's lots of conversations. But the first place, if you're wanting to know how to love your partner better, is to ask, where and how do you feel loved? And where do you not?
How do you overcome this fear of actually asking? Because that's wonderful. I think it's so powerful asking questions, but still, when it comes to even professional relationships, there's always a certain fear because it could be misunderstood. How do you approach that of starting asking questions?
I think it's important to recognize that not knowing doesn't serve you. If you're not feeling well loved by me because of something that I'm doing, and I don't find that out, you stay in a place of not feeling well loved by me. And you also have the viewpoint that I don't care or I'm not willing to do anything. So to me, I would hope the fear of, I want to do this better, I want to learn more, and your truth is going to be very important to me to find what that might be, then that moves it into a different reality. Do we like to hear that our partner is hurt here or wants something beyond what we're giving? Maybe not, but it's still the truth. So by my not addressing it, it only perpetuates it. And if I didn't know something and you tell me and now I know, now I have a choice. Whereas before I had no idea. So information is to help you. And if you view it that way, you present it in that way, like, I'd like to learn how to love you even better than I do. What are some things that are hindering that?
I love you mentioned in the book that basic communication is a love ladder. When did you come to this insight?
I think before writing the book, it just became very clear to me that that was the premise of why I wanted to write it. Because I don't think we look at communication in that way. And if I do, then it really changes the way I express myself and the way I look at you and the way I look at relationship. And then that allows me to come from the place where I feel I am offering love. Now, I don't know if you will receive it. That would be something for us to explore, but I can certainly offer that to you. And that comes from having compassion for the other person and asking yourself, what is it that they need? What is it that they want? How can I help make this go better for both of us in this?
How do you cultivate
If you let the
compassion?
relationship be more important than the topic, that cultivates it.
Brilliant. How does the book, according to you, challenge traditional ideas about communication?
Well, I think it explores it deeply and some of the places that tend to be challenges for us or conversations we don't have. So it talks about fear. It talks about love languages. It talks about attachment styles. It talks about patterns of hiding and pushing and giving and receiving. Talks about roles that we have established, expectations, demands. It talks about a lot. So it continually asks the reader, how is it that you were stepping into this? And what could you do differently? And what might be more effective? And let's try this and see what happens. How do we build bridges between ourselves and one another? How do we cultivate that conversation? There's exercises with pretty much every chapter that guide people through those different experiences and conversations to have. And so I walk them through it intentionally so they're not just left with it being a hypothetical, but really an active, more like workbook kind of book.
How do you approach a situation, especially a couple, where you would like to address the issue, you would like to see a therapist, but the partner doesn't feel like doing this next and necessary step?
Well, I'd want to explore that. Why is that? Why is that? Do, are you scared? Are you not committed? Are you fearful of the outcome? Are you depleted and overwhelmed? Why is it that you aren't in a place of wanting to help us be better than we are? And sometimes it's just not the right time. Or sometimes the emotions are so high it's not the right time. But I would want to find out. It doesn't mean you can't work on the relationship on your own, but there is a place of working together that really makes it most effective. So I do see quite a few people who come to work on what they're doing or how they can respond differently or things that they can offer and present to try to help. But there comes a place where you really need the other person to also be willing to step in with you if you want to really change the relationship deeply.
What do you think is the reason why so many people, it feels at least, have more and more fear of a relationship? Because it's a huge commitment, right? So, what do you think is the biggest challenge of committing and being in a lasting relationship?
Well, I think because we no longer have the commitment that we used to have from long ago. We're we're requiring in a lot of ways our partner to be our everything. And most of us live really long lives. So there's a lot of changes you're going to go through as people in that relationship. So I think it's really important to have an idea of what is the mission statement of our relationship? What is it that you really desire out of this relationship? And do I as well? Do we really line up on these important dreams and aspirations of what it is that we're looking for in a relationship? Because there is so much more than you're really attractive and I have fun with you. Like, what are your life goals? And what are you going to do to try to help yourself when you're going through crisis or challenges or problems to stay committed and connected and working together as a team? I don't think we really talked about it as much years and years ago. The role was kind of more male female and it was largely gender driven. And that has changed tremendously. So there's a lot of conversations about how do we do this? How are we going to figure out finances? How do we figure out, who's responsible for what? How do we figure out extended family? There's just so many more layers now than there used to be. Um, because of what has changed in marriage and what has changed in relationship. And it's important that we explore those before we make that commitment.
But it's also funny, we assume that everyone should know how to do a relationship, how to be in a relationship. That somehow we just know it from birth. But I think that's actually not the case. I think it's probably the most difficult endeavor that you can take on if you want to keep being committed and really being in a lifelong relationship. But at the same time, it might be also the most rewarding thing that you can ever experience in your life.
Well, and I think that assumption is really important. Why would I know how to do relationship with you if you and I didn't explore what we want a relationship to be? There isn't a cookie cutter. This is how to do relationship. It comes down to both people choosing how are we going to be together. I might have been really successful in my last relationship, but if there's some challenges that are going on for you with me, I've got a lot to learn. So there isn't one way to do it. It really comes down to what do the two of you choose and how do you find ways to keep growing that and stretching that and coming to places of more understanding and more compassion. I do think we believe we know how to do relationship. I also think we believe we really know how to communicate. And I think there's a lot for us to learn about all of it. All of it.
And that's so important. That's why you wrote this book, and that's why I think it's crucial that everyone really reads it in order to really also get more connected to
Oh, thank you.
yourself, and then ultimately also to your partners. And I think that's something that is really applicable even beyond a romantic relationship, because it somehow gives you the tools, some very specific strategies that you can approach a relationship. And I think relationship in general, I think, there is always this thing that I always say that, if you are not somehow in a conflict with the other person, you don't really have a relationship. It's just part of being human, that in any second we see some things slightly different. It's really ultimately a value judgment, right? Whatever we see, we make somehow a judgment based on what we perceive, and therefore it's never 100% equal to the other person. And that's why it's also challenging and important to actually take this seriously. Why is it that we underestimate communication in general so much in our culture?
I think because as soon as a child can speak words, we really rely on that. Before a child can speak, we had to be very intuitive. But as soon as they have words, we rely on that. We forget it's a definition. We also don't realize that we only know our experience. We only know our truth. We only know our beliefs. We don't know the other person's. And I don't think that is something that is really stressed in our society. Of course, you feel this way. This is common sense. My last girlfriend did it like this. Why don't you do it like this? There's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of beliefs that you haven't really found out with the other. And that's important to do. I don't think we're taught that. And I think it's important for any relationship to have that be part of what you find out together. How do I treat you?
And it's also, as you mentioned it, really language is really an abstraction. It's just how it depicts reality as accurately as possible, in terms of language, but that doesn't mean that it actually is an accurate description of reality.
Right. If I say to you that my book has a blue cover, I'll never know that you see the same color. You probably consider it blue, but I don't really know what you see. And when you recognize that, then it moves kind of away from assumptions. It's a description, but I can't see what you see. I can't feel what you feel. I can't hear what you hear. And knowing that then changes communication because it becomes very important that I have curiosity about what your experience is, not just what mine. is. And a lot of people don't want to do that because it takes time, it takes compassion, but it creates a very different relationship if you're willing to.
And one thing also in the book, you teach that how to re-recognize your partner in a new way. And I think this is the biggest challenge. I remember when I was young, in my teenage, older, adolescence. And so there's always a period and you think like, well, love is something that you can capture and it will last forever, but that's not right. So it's a really work in progress. When these butterflies are gone, then the real work comes into play. So how do you really recognize your partner in a new light, or maybe recognize him again of why you fell in love with him in the first place?
Well, it's certainly something that's beautiful to reflect upon. And throughout the relationship, this is what draw me to you. This is what I find I'm drawn to now. This is what I would like to be drawn to. I think it shifts numerous times in a relationship, hopefully with lots of deepening and with expression, with exploration. We learn to love more and more and more and more of the individual. But in the beginning, it's oftentimes a little bit fantasy. We think you've got this characteristic, you've got this characteristic, and oh, I'm smitten. But it's because we're seeing aspects that we really do enjoy and like, which is great. But after a while, we start to focus on what we don't like. And there's a place of recognizing, well, that's my challenge. You do get to be who you are. You do get to choose how you are. But I struggle with this. And so, what do we do in that place? Or what do I do in that place? Can I receive you as you are? Can I accept you as you are? Or do I have some hard places that are an absolute no? And then that would be important to explore. But it's always beautiful to look back on the relationship and what drew you together. What's drawing you together now? Where are you getting deeper? Where are you getting closer? What is life causing you to go through that's stretching you?
You remember me actually because I had this too. Sometimes I was in love with the idea that I had about the person and not, what the person actually is. Does this occur often? Because I think we are so imaginary as human beings. And somehow we always put together certain stories about whatever it is. And so when I reflect really about my past relationship, I think there was a lot of me having an idea about this person, this girlfriend, but it wasn't really, I was in love with my idea, but not so much with reality.
Well, I think you share that really, really beautifully. We fall in love with how we believe the person to be, and then reality is who they indeed are. And so most people who are in a relationship for a long time have little moments where they fall out of love. And that's when I'm having a hard time seeing this aspect that I wished wasn't there and that I don't want there. And what do I do with that? Because when you're in love with someone, you believe everything's perfect and everything's fine and it's just bliss. But it's not completely true. And so there's that place of, can I love you for who you really are? Not just the things that look so good and that excite me in the very beginning, but can I love those parts that are growing, that are being pulled up in this relationship that are hard for us to go through? Can I love those as well? And that's where you
But
find out if a relationship really has long-term potential.
I mean, it's huge, right? I think everyone is really looking for having this life partner, right? I think this is really why you do what you do, because ultimately you want to serve someone that you truly love, and whatever you do, you ultimately do it not for yourself, but truly, because you have someone that you can take care of, in a positive sense, and so it's huge. So
If
how
that's
do
what people
you
desire, I would hope so.
how did you find your love? You were also sharing on another podcast, actually. You were also married for about 20 plus 24 years or so. And so, how did you find your love, and how did it play out, if you don't mind sharing?
It was in the beginning of when there were single directories. It was a magazine. But I had done some modeling, and so they reached out to my agent and asked if I wanted to be in this magazine. And I was single. And so I thought, okay. And then people responded to the ad, and I met quite a few. And my late husband was one of them. I met 10 people. He was one of them. And he actually was beautiful at writing, and we started our relationship with letters. And I can't even tell you how many we wrote, but many, 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 many before we even got on a phone call. And so we were starting to get to know each other. I hadn't even seen a photo of him. So what was important to me was what he said and what he thought and what he believed, and how we started to create that connection in the written word, and then into the phone call, and then eventually into meeting in person. Long time ago. He's been past now 10 years. So it was 30, met him 34 years ago. But it was the beginning of it wasn't online, but it was a singles magazine. It was an interesting way to meet people. But but for me it was successful. And he had a beautiful heart, and we walked through many things in life together, including children and all of that before he passed. I learned a lot about couples connection and communication from my marriage, where we were really successful, where we weren't as successful. There was a lot to learn there. And so I explored it deeply with him.
How did you change over time, and how did you approach this whole process? Because you, on one hand, you were a psychotherapist, but at the same time, you were also a wife and a mother.
Well, we would talk about it. We would have a monthly sit down where we'd talk about where are we doing really well, where are we not. We checked in with each other almost every day to see if there were places of misunderstanding or hurt or not coming through, or if something was desired. So we had a very active conversation about where we were and what we were wanting and what we were becoming. And to me, that was important. But the monthly check in was an evaluation that we did. It's something I suggest in the book. We went through and said, where are we financially? Where are we physically? Where are we mentally? Where are we emotionally? Where are we with the family? And we explore, where are we doing well? Where are we not? What do we need to change? What can we address? So those are important things to keep checking in your relationship to find out. You'll see some places where you're amazing most times, and you'll see some places that need a little bit more attention, and it'll start to become a little bit clearer where you have the hardest time. And then we would read books, or listen to radio programs, or speak with others about, like, what could we do here? Do you have suggestions here? What can we figure out? We did retreats, we did therapy, we did lots of different things to try to find out, how do we cultivate love and respect and honesty and openness.
How long did it take you to
And
write
we struggled
the book?
too. There's a lot to being married to someone. So we struggled too, and that was part of our learning process. Where do I have a hard time caring about your needs? Where do we have a hard time just coming through for each other? What does that look like?
And I think this is so important. What you're mentioning is that everything that is good, it takes time, it takes effort, right? And I think it's also, to some extent, it's really important to go into a relationship with this kind of mindset that love is a verb.
Yeah, it's an action. It's an action. There's a lot of being and doing to cultivate love. a lot of curiosity. Yes.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I started structurally on it 4 years before I wrote it. So I had an idea of what I wanted to write. And then when I actually sat down to write it, it took about, well, you also have many edits. And so from beginning to end, about a year and a quarter. Um, because I had it read by several people and then went through copywriting, and then when a publisher accepted it, needed to go through and edit it again. So it went through several ideations of it before it became the book that it is. But in the core of writing it, it took me about 6 months, devoting pretty much the whole weekend to trying to get the words out and cultivate a book that would be cohesive. And then after that, it was edits.
What how does it make you feel when you read all these outstanding comments on Amazon?
Oh, it's such a beautiful gift because I wrote the book to try to help people in ways that I knew could be really beneficial and to share exercises and ideas and concepts that I know most of my couples need some support and care in. And I knew there's, you know, billions of people that I won't ever reach in my practice. And so I wanted to have a way to share with the world just my perspective. For someone who wants to be heart centered, it's a great book. For someone who wants to learn to speak with the heart, it's a great book. And that's not everyone. Not everyone comes from that emotional connected center, but that's how I wanted to write it. So it delights me that people are enjoying it and sharing it and saying it's a must read and coming back and telling me their success stories. It's beautiful because it's so much of my life to create that book. And that's I wanted it to bless people. So I'm really glad that of course that it has.
What's the best and single most important step to really start thinking with the heart?
Caring about your personal experience and caring equally about the other. I need to not forget mine, but I also need to not ignore yours. And then that shifts so much if I'm willing to care about what your experience is, even though it is very different than mine.
Dr. Browne, what makes you feel alive?
Oh, new experiences that I haven't yet experienced. So it can be seeing something beautiful in nature. It can be feeling a hug from another person. What makes me feel alive is to be connected to something in some way that it impacts me. When I stay in the presence of really enjoying and celebrating what today is and what it is that I have and what it is that you have, that's what makes me feel alive and vital. And of course, it's wonderful when it's lots of fun and pleasure. But what makes me feel alive is recognizing that in this moment, you can create so much if you choose to.
Truly, truly, truly a gift. Thank you so much, Dr. Browne, for your time. And now I invite everyone to really order a copy of Thinking with the Heart. You get it everywhere, of course, on Amazon. Buy a copy and really change and uplift your relationship at any level. Thank you so much and being truly a blessing to me and really the world. Dr. Heather Browne.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.the-ykm.com. Meant to make you grow.